Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here with of the C47 and another episode of Gearbox 2.0. It's a live stream. It is a cluster, and I can tell you why. I mean this with all love, but my in-laws descended upon us yesterday. Back out in the barn, and I actually gave myself plenty of time to set everything up. Everything was all set to go, picture, sound, and then, you know, zeros and ones. Oh, I'm going to be hitting Flask early today. You got that right, Rimrock Creative Media. All right. They're here for a month. Love them. It's going to be a challenge. I'm going to be out here a lot, and will be for today's Camera and Flask as well. And a great episode coming up. There's a link to it. We are doing another challenge, which people seem to like very much. And that is going to be a $3,500, hold on, taking the shine off a little bit. This stuff is magic, by the way. $3,500 used gear challenge. So myself, Caleb, and Ben have gone to the used section of B&H Photo. We have $3,500. We have essentially no kit, except for maybe some bags to hold our gear in and some batteries and cards, because you can't get a lot of that in the used department. And we have to make a one-camera kit that we can actually go and do production with. So stands and tripod, modifiers, audio, camera, all the fun stuff. I'm still questioning my furniture polish. Yeah, it's kind of like furniture polish. I'm still questioning my choice of camera. I might stick with it because I'm in that dollar tier. There's some things I really like about it, some other things I'm really sort of questioning, but it might be fun to leave that camera in for today. So that's at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And no XT3 this time, Chris. So I'm not falling onto the XT3 as my camera system. In fact, I purposely didn't go down the Fujifilm route because I thought, come on, that's just getting a little bit ridiculous. So welcome everybody, Paul, Chris, Rimrock Creative Media, Filmmaker Media, of course, Caleb, Mike, Dave, Richard, Brian, Travis, John. If I've repeated myself, it's just because of this ridiculous getting things going. The other John, McCabe. So tonight's episode, it's going to be fun. Yeah, this is $3,500 challenge is going to be really, really fun tonight. So tune in and we'll have a good time. I'm hitting that bottle today for sure. And I apologize to Scott Emerton when I have my follow-up call with him after Camera and Flask, because I might be a little loopy after that. Okay, so what's up, David, the building sheriff? Okay, so we're talking about being self-employed today. And if my exposure is a little low, let me know. I think it's okay based on stuff. We're going to just go with it. There's no more technical changes here. And why everything short-circuited is been explained already. It's the in-law factor. The in-law effect. By the way, I bought a new lens today. I should put a link to it here in the live stream. B&H is selling the 17 to 55 EFS lens, the Canon. It's not an L lens. It's not weather sealed. It is sharp as all a mother, and it is a workhorse when you're talking about dock style. Obviously has AF and things like that. I think I'm waiting for it to get back in stock, but I ordered it. I think I paid $549 or $529. There we go. Man, there's all kinds of stuff going on. I'm going to leave that. Am I pay-booing? I'm not pay-booing. That sounds like it would hurt, and it sounds like it requires you to sit down on something. I just, everybody, if we say 10-1, 10-2, we know what that means in the industry. I think I'm going to say I just need to, hey, Bill, welcome. I think I'm going to be back in about 10 minutes. I got to go pay-boo. Richard, that 17 to 55 is kind of a ridiculous lens. If it was weather sealed and the barrel didn't extend out from it, similarly to like the 70 to 200, then it would be amazing. I think pay-booing would tickle. I think it would be kind of like, kind of fun, but a little uncomfortable if you pay-boo. So there we go. So I know what pay booing is, Brian. I know about the whole B&H thing, and that it's basically you can pay credit card, some sort of percentage rate, and then all of a sudden your tax goes away. Chris, you did not pay boo the bed last night, did you? Oh my God. Oh, on that last gig. I thought you said the bed. Oh no, you pay booed the bed on that last gig. Oh my goodness. Did you see the interest rate that the pay boo card has? 30%. Well, there you go. It all makes sense now. All right, kids. So drink of water, not onto the scotch until this afternoon. You thought I was going to say evening. And we're going to talk about being self-employed. So look, this is an experiment here, doing live streams of Gearbox. Caleb and I have been talking about this. I have a vision which includes really good internet, which I don't have. And it also includes multiple cameras, and it includes doing episodes of Gearbox that are like 10 to 20 minutes long every week, where I'm showing you a particular way to light something or to do something with audio or things like that. I think I've got some more stuff to work out here, but I really enjoy the live streams because, especially if I can make the text larger in the pop-up or pop-out chat. Maybe there is a way to do that. Oh, well, there you go. I kind of did it. So, you know, I like it because I get to talk to you guys and I get to interact. And, you know, as somebody who likes to teach, then that's kind of an ideal situation for me overall. I just zoomed. It's just a technical nightmare here. I just zoomed into the page and then everything went larger so I could read it, and then it wouldn't zoom out. So, you know, such is life. So any more Payboo jokes here? Good. Okay. So Caleb, I've ordered 2 of those LED lights from yesterday's video. How do they compare to the LED slap bracket from NAB? I can answer that, Travis. Slap bracket from the Lumi light, I would say is more color accurate as far as I can tell, but I don't have the light. I'm getting one of those lights in too. When I went to go buy the black version of it yesterday, there was a 35% off coupon in my cart. Maybe that's because I just spend thousands of dollars all the time on Amazon. And I got the thing for $12.99, so I was excited. So what, the stick lights? Yeah, let's see what that, you better, okay, good. All right, so here we go, being self-employed. So I have had my own business since 1996. And prior to that, I was still working in creative. And there you go. So yes, good deal on that, Travis, for sure. And, you know, being self-employed, first of all, let me just set this up by saying I couldn't do what I do for a living probably any other way at this point in time. And I have had many odd jobs in my lifetime. Recently, I think it was on Twitter, people, you know, listed 5 jobs that they've had in their life. And I worked in the deli when I was a kid, sweeping and cracking eggs into big white buckets in the morning. I worked as a messenger. I got my working papers when I was 14 when I lived in New York, and I became a street vendor, first selling ice cream and then shish kebab during a whole summer in New York when I was 15. When I was done with school, I moved to London. I worked in restaurants as a busboy, TGIF, and the original Hard Rock Cafe, Hyde Park Corner. And I then came back to the States and I sold dry cleaning ticket books door to door for almost 2 years, which really has no up in terms of where you can go with it. But when you're 19, 20 years old, you can actually make a pretty good amount of money doing that if you're good at doing it. And then just getting into the creative industry, because I knew when I was in school that I wanted to do something that was a combination of business and the arts. I started very young as a photographer. My father is a professional photographer. We had a darkroom in our kitchen, and we had this wooden table that we would eat at. And then at night, all of the trays would go out, and those would get filled with chemicals. And God only knows what I've ingested over the years because of that. So there you go. So photography early on, and continued for quite a while with that. Then I started to get into graphic design and other things. And then by the mid 90s, of course, we had the web exploding. I was working for a creative company, and they were doing a lot of branding and multimedia work for primarily, because of where they were in Parsippany, New Jersey, the medical industry, which means pharmaceutical. And so I will get my superpowers, Alex. Your handle's a little different, Alex Miner. I like it. I'm in. So basically, I was working for this company, and I felt like my hands were tied, because if you've ever worked for big companies, statements of work, and lots of cooks in the kitchen, what can happen, especially in pharmaceutical with creative, is you can go through an entire process. Excuse me. You can go through an entire process with a client where you think you know everybody who's part of the decision-making process, and then you get to the end of the project where you're doing final reviews. And I always say that there's like a little door. It's almost like Alice in Wonderland, and they open up this tiny little door, and it goes into another world at the company where a whole bunch of other people have to review and give their feedback on your project. And they don't want to show it to them until that point. But what winds up happening in those types of situations, in those types of industries, is if one or more of those people through that tiny little door in that other little world don't like something about the project, it doesn't actually have anything to do with money and saying, can you change this? They're happy to pay to sometimes essentially redo the whole project. And you just think to yourself, well, why didn't we just know about those people and have a dialogue with them to begin with? And then we could have actually produced the right project from the beginning. So kind of deflating creatively. And I felt like that wasn't where I wanted to go in terms of the type of work I was doing. So that company was very nice to allow me to take a few particular clients that didn't necessarily fit into their bucket. And then I started a creative company. And initially, in the mid sort of to starting to be the late 90s, I was primarily focused on creating branded web content or websites and website development. And yeah, I worked at the TGIF at Covent Garden in London from 90 to 91. Dude, that's ridiculous. Good chance I was working there as a busboy. I'm just telling you. And I was not assisting any famous photographer. I was a little 19, was I? Yeah, something like that. I was a punk. I wasn't really a punk, but I was a kid. All right, so took some clients with me, a lot of web development stuff, and honestly, it was really interesting in the beginning. You can take a look at a book called Creating Killer Websites, and there was a lot of excitement going on at the time when people were trying to figure out how they could take something that looked like mosaic and gray backgrounds, and we could actually push things in terms of design. And sometimes I would go through a 3 or 4 step process to optimize a GIF or a JPEG so it would load faster when people had, at best, 14.4 modems. And I worked in a company, by the way, that company that I worked with in Parsippany, they had a T1 line in their building in 1995. And so that was crazy because I'd go home and I'd have this dog slow modem, and in fact a lot of the time that's where we would optimize the graphics and stuff, because you had to look at and deal with stuff based on the lowest common denominator. People weren't surfing the web on T1 lines. Yes, well, our paths may have crossed. I don't know. Yes, for sure. Okay, good. So so now that I've digressed and I'm thinking about taking that bus from Pimlico over to, and getting to Covent Garden and working the TGIF, whatever, that's it. So shiz nuts, you weren't there last week. We missed you on the Camera and Flash show. You better be there today. This is a very scattered episode, but I like the dialogue. So then at a certain point, I wound up getting some clients in the music industry. And at a certain point, those clients wanted to do something with video. We were starting to post videos in pop-up windows that were 320 by 240, because we were basically doing standard definition, right? So we got 720 by 480, and we would basically start to post these little videos that people could pop up, little QuickTime things and stuff like that. So basically, that started to push me towards video production, and then I became a producer who didn't know how to produce, and I didn't know anything about production, and that's a long time ago. But I did kind of know from the beginning that the writing was on the wall, that unless I wanted to start working for certain types of industries, like going into education, even though I'm an educator, I mean actually teaching in a school, or government, that the chances of having job security even back then was much lower than it had been historically in this country. You know, after World War II, there was a concept where you could become a lifer. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you could go and work for a company for the rest of your life and have job security. And that's all out the window now. I also don't think I'm tuned well to go into an office and punch a card and be there from 9 to 5 or from 7 to 8 or whatever the times are that you get there. So basically, you know, I started to get into this video production thing, and with photography and a little bit of video in high school as a background, I realized that that would be the path that I'd much rather take than becoming a web developer. And even pretty early on in the early 2000s, things started to happen with website development where it was also obvious that there was a small window of time where the Razorfishes of the world could make a lot of money. And it seemed far more interesting for me personally to get into video production and filmmaking. And so, you know, this is the path that I decided to take. But when you take that path and you're in your 20s and you don't have kids yet, it's very different than when you think about a pivot in mid-career. And so I think that one of the things that maybe made it a little more digestible for me was that when you're that age, I think, and some of you may be that age, that you can take a little bit more of a risk because your overall responsibility, while at that time may seem humongous, is nothing in comparison to what you actually find out your responsibility is later in your life if you decide to have kids and then think about school and all of the other expenses and the nut that is living in this world today, which is absolutely ridiculous. So Alex had a friend who worked at Razorfish. They made a lot of money. I don't know if your friend did, but as a company they did. A lot of things happened before that bubble burst, right? And then we, of course, had 2008 as all. The Quadra, let's not even go there. The 950, what a beast. Basically, like you could use that as like to rest your shoulder on. That was a Quadra 950, I would say height-wise, similar to like a Dinklage, maybe. Am I allowed to say that? I would say about it. It was definitely a pretty gigantic computer. And actually, when I first started in this business, I was working for a graphic design firm before I went into the multimedia side of it. And that graphic design firm, I was doing a lot of business development and stuff. They were all Quadra-based, early versions of Quark Express, Illustrator, Photoshop, and all of that kind of stuff. So your friend is a millionaire now. Well, I'm not. So good for your friend. Maybe your friend should be doing this this live stream, because I don't know if I'm going to impart any knowledge to anybody about this, but I do want to talk about it. So trying to reawaken. John is trying to reawaken. Yeah, I mean, look, that's what weekends are for. You've got to be motivated. You've got to get people together, and you've got to create some stuff. Who wants job security if it makes you secure in something you're not interested in? Chris, 1,000,000%. So the ultimate thing here, and it's just beating a dead horse, is you're hopefully going to choose something that you're going to do for a living that you're going to be interested in and have some passion for on a day in, day out basis. Because living for leaving work and living for the weekends and your vacations is not a great existence for any human being. I'm very much faced with this right now because I have an 18 going on 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And with my oldest, when I look at her and where she's going, I want her to be happy in her life. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't want her to make a living and be able to support herself. I do 1,000,000% want her to be able to do that. But I would be a hypocrite if I said, you should go into one of these fields because they can give you security. It's going to be a lot of hard work to a certain point in time, because I'm not really a believer in that. I think that you have to go for what you are interested in and try to make that work. I started in pro sound at 17, then video, then photography. This is Travis. I do all three now as a freelancer. The bulk of local and regional work is stills and video, and national gigs or sound. That's interesting. Alex talking to Paul. Yeah. Learn SEO. That's kind of cool, actually. How did you start on YouTube? How much of your time is spent on the platform? That's a good question. So I'm going along, minding my own business and growing as a producer and doing more video production work. I also took a parallel path in the early 2000s where I knew that I wanted to educate people. So I started to teach post-production because I was working with Apple and some other companies and things like that. And basically, I've told this story before. I'll tell you the very short version of it. In 2008, when everything just disintegrated, I had just had my third kid, and I had gone for 9 months making maybe $1,500, and I was trying to pay for a house and 3 kids and all the stuff that goes with that. And I wasn't doing anything, not because I didn't want to do something, but because there was no work that was coming in. And I decided at that point in time that I needed to do something every day. So that's actually when the C47 came to fruition. I have a really good working relationship with Able Cine. I was doing some stuff with them as a company. And while we originally thought that we were going to do the C47 together, in the end, it was the best choice and was actually recommended by Pete Able over at Able Cine that I go at it alone with some support from Able Cine. So basically some initial equipment to get it started. And what I decided to do was start a website. I decided to start creating content. And for 3 months, I did this, but recorded content, uploaded. I used, I think I used blip.tv initially to host the videos. They were published to the c47.com website. And I did register and set up a YouTube channel very early on, but I made some major, in my own opinion, major mistakes when it comes to where I was pushing my content. I made a very critical error, I think, in terms of where I thought content needed to be. I had this idea that from a branding standpoint, I should be trying to get all of the eyeballs to come to the c47.com because that's what would grow that particular website. That would get more eyeballs on the brand, and that in turn would increase the opportunities for production, sponsorships, and things like that. I also had a feeling that I wanted it to be a very pure educational channel, or not channel, destination, website, brand. And as a result, I didn't push banner ads. I didn't do anything to set up affiliate sales. This is back in really 2009. And so while I did a daily video 5 days a week for almost 3+ years, I really made some, I think, terrible choices regarding that. And then I started to look at what was going on with YouTube and realized at a certain point that I probably should have just been pushing all of my content there and then select content to my website. So I think I I don't know who this question is for. So that's kind of how I got into the YouTube thing. And then when I rekindled Gearbox 2.0, which is after we moved to the West Coast, I decided that a once a week would make a lot of sense, and then really getting Camera & Flask with Caleb and Ben off the ground as the core content. This Gearbox is still very much a work in progress because I'm trying to figure out what that format's going to be. Of course, I want the channel to grow, and I want to commit time to this. I like the interaction here. The trick with doing live streams is you want to talk about a subject matter, but you also want to address people's comments, and that can be very tricky. One trick that Caleb said that he uses, it's not really a trick, is if you want me to answer a question, then do an @ C47 in the chat right now, and then those will flag those more for me to put my attention on. If you're having a conversation with other people within the chat, that's totally cool, but just put an @ the C47 if you want to ask me a question. But, you know, that is also part of why I like this particular format, because people are communicating with each other about stuff that might relate to the subject matter that I'm talking about. And then you guys are giving each other advice. You're having conversations about things. You are, you know, sharing resources for the things that are helping you do what you're doing in a better way. So let's just say, you know, let's call a spade, as they say. Being a freelancer or being self-employed is not easy. And it's, this is actually, Travis, this is a great question. So my biggest question for me, meaning me, my biggest question for you, Jem, I'll say that, is how do you know when and how to scale your company? It's time for me, but my clients really enjoy that I handle the planning, shoot, and edit. So Travis, I think let's discuss this, because I've gone through many iterations of what I would consider being self-employed, but having a company. In the beginning, I had the idea that I was going to start a small creative company, and as time went on, it was going to grow with employees, and we were going to be cranking out work 24/7. Or hopefully not 24/7, but we were going to be cranking out work for clients on a continuous basis, and the company would get bigger and bigger, and I had these ideas of cool spaces to be in and stuff like that. So I was always working from home. I had a separate space back in New Jersey, which was a carriage house, and I started to set things up as a company where I could hire employees. So I started off initially by having some interns, paid interns, come in from universities to start to do work. And then if they were working out and I had a person who was a good designer and they were, you know, kind of getting everything, then I offered them a job. The problem is that when you become a company on a small scale and you start to match taxes and you start to have to think about things like, can I or can I not offer benefits to an employee, the whole structure of your company changes very quickly. And the thing that's interesting about that is that you, of course, if you're a human being with feelings, care about and have a responsibility for the employees that you have. You start to realize that the growing pains are so much about that beginning part of when you are starting a company, because you have to lay out a lot more money than if it was just you. And then you have to worry about, am I an S Corp? Am I a sub S? Am I LLC? I made mistakes having to do with that. And then you start to think about, okay, what am I responsible for when it comes to employees? And that becomes incredibly difficult, Travis, and anybody else listening to this. So that transition from becoming you or you and one other person who's a partner, that could be your spouse or just somebody you started the company with, and then expanding, really becomes a decision as to whether or not you want to go down the employee route, or you're better structured as a company that is a little more nimble and you are hiring independent contractors for finite amounts of time. And that could be for 2 or 3 days on a production. That could be 2 or 3 or 6 months for a longer term project. And just treating it that way. And then having a contract for the person that you're hiring, that they're an independent contractor, coming up with an agreed upon sum or amount for the scope of work that they have. And I found that after a few, I wouldn't say false starts, but a few starts of having employees, that for me, it was very obvious that the independent contractor route would make a lot more sense, especially because so much of the work that I do is production related, and I was being a producer, and also that I was traveling a lot. So if you travel a lot and you have 1 or 2 employees, you're never around for those employees, especially if you only have 1, and that's not a great work environment for somebody unless they really love to work by themselves. So there's a lot of factors that come into, that scalability of what you do with your company. I found that I like to do certain things, and that client contact is important. Being the creative director or the producer director is also really important. I'd say that the biggest hurdle that you can run into is the situation where you have to let go of control. And that is true whether you have employees or you're hiring independent contractors. You need to have enough certainty in what it is that you're looking for and trying to get, but you have to, at a certain point, be able to transition where you're not micromanaging. And that's incredibly important because it's so hard to make that transition when you are a person that's like me, and I'm assuming like a lot of creatives, where you want to have control over everything. And you're going to have to let go at times and then see how it goes and then make adjustments. Because what you want to do is you want to find really good people who are better at their job than you are for that specific task or the thing that they're doing. And you want them to not only execute what they need to do for that job, but hopefully the end goal is that they are also contributing to the content that is being created. And I want that open dialogue. And sometimes it gets lost. Sometimes it drops away. And you have to be the one that's responsible for making sure that that communication is happening so that the people that you're hiring as creatives are contributing to the overall work that you're doing, making it possible for you to expand as a company. Because even if they are an independent contractor, if they are allowing you to now go out and get new business, if they're allowing you to concentrate on parts of what you're doing that you can't concentrate on if you're in the trenches just doing all of the work, the production, the post, and all of the things that come with that, I think that for me, that was one of the hardest things for me to do, but it was also one of the things that allowed me to grow as a company in terms of being able to get more work. And for me, the biggest area that everything changed was when I stopped doing all of the post-production myself and having to do all of that. And I started to work with people and get people on board to do post-production. And that changed a lot for me. So scaling is important. It's how you scale that is going to be largely based on who you are as a person and your vision for how you want to grow the company in terms of what roles you still want to have, and then what roles are the roles that are holding you back from allowing you to take on more work and also maybe larger projects. So that he wants to look and feel very like giant. Okay. Yeah, Filmmaker Media needs 10 episodes a month. How in the hell do I price that? I will need more equipment for this. I run into this a lot. Please advise. So Filmmaker Media is being asked to do essentially a 10 episode a month series. I don't know what the post schedule is going to be like on that. Very much like Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And how do you do it? Well, you're going to have to bring some people on who have that equipment to start with, I think. You're going to have to price them on a day rate as owner-operators. And you're going to have to put together a budget sheet, maybe look at last week's live stream where I go over budgeting and proposals and figure out, pre-production, production, post, the equipment necessary. Again, I would recommend that you're going to do owner operators. I would also recommend that when it comes to something like that, that you want to have a sound person there every single day when you're in production, because it sounds like you're going to need, not only multiple cameras, but you're going to need additional mics. And I would absolutely set this up so that you have people who are on board for the post. There's no way that you're going to be able to sustain the content for 10 episodes a month from a production standpoint and not have a machine in place that's not you. It can't be you that is doing the post on that series. So does advertising work? All my work has just been word of mouth. So Brian, I don't know if advertising works. I know that this new type of promotion, in my mind, is kind of our form of advertising. So whether you had a Vimeo channel at some point or not, you have a YouTube channel. I think that for me, it's putting the work that I've done and the type of work that I think that I am good at out there that makes a lot of sense. My YouTube channel is very heavy on where my wheelhouse is, and my wheelhouse very much is in specializing in producing and directing, and sometimes being the one delivering educational content related to products and things that we use in video production and filmmaking. So when you look at my channel, there's a lot of playlists for content that I've created for outside companies. I still need to update it. I just did a series for ZEISS on their bodice lenses. And it gives people the idea of the types of things that not only I like to do, but I think that I'm good at doing. So are you going to take out an ad right now to promote that you're a creative company? I don't know that that's really advantageous. Maybe creating videos, short videos having to do with the things you're interested in related to video production and filmmaking would be a good idea. And then if there's content out there, and you have a YouTube channel, start to create playlists with that content so that people can quickly and easily access that on your channel. Bill, story behind the C47. Do you mean the name the C47, or do you mean the whole story behind the company? Let me know the answer to that question. You have to get a deposit, as Alex said. If you're going to do a multi-part series, you have to cover production costs. That's just too much to float in my mind. Right. So now, keeping in mind, this is for a guy who is not in the film industry. He has no clue how big this can get. So I want to minimize it as much as I can. So I want to say to filmmaker media that this is a challenge that we run into all of the time as a company. As self-employed, yes, but as independent producer directors, it's this challenge of scale, not in terms of how you scale your company, but it's scale based on the prospective client or the existing client that you have. There's different tiers of client. It doesn't mean that one is lesser than the other. It just means that the type of company that they are and the type of work that they do, the products and or services that they produce are in different categories. So if you're doing work for Coca-Cola or Apple or Google, you're not doing the same type of work as you would be doing for this person who's interested in producing this series. But there's an education that has to happen for somebody like that, which is if they really want to do something and they have this concept, the first thing they need to do is be willing to do a lot of homework. If they're verbalizing their idea for a 10-part a month series, what is justifying the fact that they're doing 10 of these a month? And why do they think they need to do 10 of these a month? Who is their target audience, their potential target audience? have they identified that audience, and do they feel that they have an idea of how they're going to reach that audience besides just starting a YouTube channel and throwing the content up there? Who's the talent involved? Is it a known or an unknown, no-name talent? Is there something built into this production that is going to get eyeballs, that is going to give this series a better chance of success? Jerry Seinfeld, come on. Hadn't done anything in a long time, decided he wanted to do something. He has pretty much any production resource available to him, obviously the budget to do that. I'm faced with these challenges all of the time. I'm about to go into producing a long-form educational course for a company, and we want it to be of a certain quality and production value, but we're going to be doing it with a budget that probably isn't even a tenth of the budget for the type of content that we're aspiring to. Luckily for that production, I'm dealing with people who are production savvy. So they are people who understand what the scope of something is. And, you know, I don't think that you can go into a project like this without creating a comprehensive blueprint, a proposal, and a budget estimate to give the person who's looking at doing this the reality of what it is they're doing. I don't think you have to minimize the shock. You have to be reasonable in what your rates are and be fair about what it is that you're producing. But if you are worried about their response to what you're going to say is the actuality, the total reality of what it's going to take to do the production, it's going to bite you in the ass later on. It's going to be awful for you later on. Because right now, at this time, is the time to create the correct expectation of what the scope of a project is. It's not okay to do that once you're into the project. Don't soft sell a project from the standpoint of, oh, it's going to be cool, we'll figure it out, knowing that you're going to be running into brick walls later on, because that's unfair to you and it's unfair to the client. The reality is that production is hard and it has lots of moving parts and it takes a lot of planning. And if they don't have a correct estimation of what the scope of a project is, any kind of project, then you're not doing your job, your due diligence, and you are not being responsible for what that project's going to be. And that's where you lead into that's where you go into situations where you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble in terms of overages and having to eat part of the cost of a project, making sure your proposal and your budget is black and white as opposed to gray is essential to the potential success of a project. You have to figure that stuff out now, otherwise that's just going to be a cluster. No doubt about it, based on the little bit of information I'm getting about this project. You're just going to have to sit down and say, are you willing to do your homework? Because this is a big project. Let's figure this thing out. If you're really excited about it and you really want to do it, then you're going to have to say, okay, is this somebody I'm going to be able to work with long term? Do they actually understand the scope of this? Are they willing to put the work in to do this? And who are they expecting to do what parts of this project? Okay, so here we go. So how do you present a bid for clients? Do you present in person if local, send a PDF, or send custom proposal webpage? It's either via email or it's rarely in person now. It's a lot of back and forth. When I write a proposal and I create a budget, it is my blueprint for the entire production. Again, last week's episode of Gearbox was a live stream that covers overall process for proposals and budgets. So I recommend maybe you watch that. Tesla owners will be interviewed. Yeah, so that's cool. It's still going to take a lot of work to do this. So you don't have to worry about if they can get somebody who's cheaper, because there's always going to be somebody who's cheaper. And there's always going to be somebody who is hungry to just make money on a project. Never make money the reason for doing the project. That should be a byproduct. APS. How do I manage downtime? I have 3 children. That's how I manage it. I don't like it because I want to be working, but yeah. You don't charge based on how much downtime you have. You charge fairly for the scope of the project. Honestly, you know, I said there are different scales of clients, and look, the reality is that yes, if you're doing a national commercial and you're bidding on that for Coca-Cola, you're not going to bid that the same way that you're going to bid a corporate job. But that's a different tier. You're going to bring in a name DP. You might, as a producer, bring in name director unless you're directing it. You're going to be bidding in a way that you're probably going to have 25% for your production company fee, maybe not 15 or 20%. And your costs for everything are going to be higher in that type of situation. If they're the prices that you put for corporate work, Coca-Cola is not even going to look at it. And I'm not saying I'm doing Coca-Cola commercials. That's just the reality of that. Plus, if you get into the agency model, F that right now. I mean, people are on like net 180 for agencies right now. And that is a nightmare industry in some respects and can also make a lot of money in others. I think you should aspire to being a day player if you want to do commercial work. I'm not going for that type of work on a big basis. I don't mind creating a commercial that's smaller scale, that's web driven, but that whole agency model, spec work, having to lay money out, having to borrow money to actually make the production happen, that's not something I'm interested in doing in terms of what I'm doing. The reality is that it's correct expectation for the work that you're doing. And when I create a budget and I also create a proposal, what I try to do is I figure out where this is going to happen, what my costs are going to be as a producer in terms of my crew and having the right crew for that production, what my costs are going to be for equipment, for location, for travel, accommodations, meals and expenses. And I just lay it all out in a spreadsheet. And that's what I give to the client as part of my proposal and budget. Again, watch last week's episode if you want to get a sense of my approach for creating proposals and budgets. That is last week. Yes, Daniel. So you can check out last week's episode. This week's episode will get edited a little bit later today to take out all of the crap before I did a clap and actually started the episode again. Getting close to an hour. I'll talk for another few minutes about this stuff and see if there's any other questions. Bill, I started the C-47 because I wasn't working. You have to look up what a C-47 is. I can tell you it's not an airplane. And I decided that what I wanted to do is take what I was doing as an educator, and I wanted to move that into creating online content that had to do with video production and filmmaking. It also became a huge, and still is a huge, learning platform for me in terms of every day thinking about what I'm doing and keeping me on my toes and allowing me to create content on a regular basis that's not client-driven and isn't technically project-driven, and I like to do that. And then the question Chris has is, please describe how you felt when you realized that your business was working out for you and becoming relatively stable income-wise. Chris, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this out loud to everybody who might be watching this. It gets better, and you become more confident in the fact that it's going to work out, but it's never stable and it's never a guarantee. There are lovely periods of time where you have 6 to 12 months where there's a steady stream of work from one client or two clients, and you're feeling good and money's going in the bank and you're paying off some of your debts. But make no mistake about it, if you're going to go into this business as a company that's producing content beyond being a day player, it is going to be a roller coaster ride. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't get better or your rates don't go up or you don't get larger scale of work, but you have to never put your eggs in one or two baskets. You have to find the way in terms of that cycle that you don't get so entrenched in a project or two that you're not looking out for new projects. I'm there right now. I'm in some stuff and I'm like, I have to remember to start reaching out to companies and people that I know that may have wanted me to create content and I didn't have time to do it, or what's going on? Is there something that you guys want to do? That's part of my process. It's not like they just pick up the phone or send me a text or send me an email and say, hey, we have an idea for a project. I'm like, oh, great. Now that'll fill next month. There's an active process where I'm not only creating content regularly, but I'm also reaching out to companies who, you know, I've had long-term relationships with to find out if anything's going on. And it might not be now, but you're putting that little whisper in their ear. And I also am a firm believer that for me personally, that creating ongoing content on my YouTube channel and just being out there is really good for me in terms of getting business from the people that I do a lot of work for, which is within this industry. So when I had that quiet period, I wasn't getting the same type of work in terms of sponsored videos and creating educational content, except for from Canon. And I think that that's changed considerably since I've ramped up again since last summer, and I'm doing Gearbox regularly. When you're out there and you're talking to people and those people are a company's audience, then that makes a stronger potential relationship with companies and creating content. Bill, thumbs up. So I didn't mean to laugh there, Chris, but the reality is it's like, it's not easy. And when you have 3 kids and the stuff that I'm trying to sustain here, it's really not easy. But I'm doing things now, and I have things now that I didn't have 10 or 15 years ago. Some of that I think is breeded by necessity. I'm not driven by making money. I want to make money, but again, it's always a byproduct. But whenever there's a necessity to make something happen, whether it's to come up with money for my kids for their education, or it's for a new piece of equipment, necessity breeds something in me that, maybe that's a wrong word, but it does something to me that I get focused and somehow usually wind up doing what's necessary. And then work does show up, by the way. Once you've established yourself as somebody who's creating a certain type of work, hopefully it's work that you like to do, you'll find that there are cycles, and they're not always predictable cycles in our industry, but there are cycles where somebody will reach out to you and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. You have a conversation with somebody about something totally disrelated, but they mention something, and then you reach out to somebody else. Stuff happens. So there you go. So we've got, if you want stability, compromise, and work for an industry, then freelance on the side. Yeah, exactly. I think you confirmed what I already knew and was a little afraid to confront. Chris, it is definitely about confront. You have to know that this is definitely an industry that is about passion, and it is about really wanting to do it. You will do well if you are good at what you do. Temperament goes a long way in terms of your relationships. Confidence, but not cockiness, is also really important. And some of that comes from experience. You just have confronted enough situations. You've had enough situations where you can quickly address a question or a situation or a problem. But I have to say that for me personally, the thing that I love almost more than anything else about what it is that I do in this industry is that I'm still learning every single day. And as an educator, that's great because I don't feel in any way, shape, or form that I know everything. And what I'm interested in is continually evolving. And when I start to feel comfortable in one area, I start to say, well, maybe that's not the way I want to light anymore, or I want to explore other ways to light, or I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable about my understanding of light and how to control it and where I want it to be. And now I really want to work on becoming a better camera operator, or on my composition, or working on the style of how I'd like to shoot. And that comes into play in the bigger scale as well in terms of productions and being able to take on bigger productions. But every single job that you have, you learn something from. I just did a corporate job, and it was a job we did a year ago in almost the same exact circumstances. And we ran into, in post-production, problems that didn't exist in the last job. And I not only learned a lot while we were solving the problems that came up, but I think that we set sort of a path for future stuff where we won't run into necessarily that same problem again, but there'll be new problems that will come up. So I think I'm ending this one. It was a pleasure. I'm going to put a link here to today's episode of Camera and Flask. $3,500 US used gear kit from B&H Photo. Ben, myself, and Caleb cannot wait to see what the gentlemen have in store for that. That is at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and then at midnight in the lovely Czech Republic, which I don't think Ben is going to be in today, so he'll be in GMT, coming to us from England. So thank you, everybody. Hopefully there is some nugget of something that you get out of these live streams. I'm still trying to figure out if I'm going to be doing these in this format every week. Yes, Gerald. And I will cut this episode up so it's a little bit tighter once it actually gets published using the editor there. And I'll see some of you, hopefully all of you, at Camera and Flask a little bit later today, 5 hours from now, or just under to be exact. And thank you very much for watching. And again, as a follow-up, check out last week's episode on proposals and budgets. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do the thing. Subscribe. Tap the bell if you want notifications. I don't assault you with community posts. It's basically just our 2 weekly episodes of Gearbox and Camera and Flask. And as always, head over to thec47.com to the contact page if you have a particular question that you would like to ask. And thank you very much. And sorry for the technical difficulties that people watching this later on probably won't see anyway. So take care.